kind of ceremony should one do? You see on the movies and TV, the ideal of the perfect life is to get married. A couple leaving a church, people throwing rice at them. So I think you get the idea. So this is what would, in your mind, what would be the proper ceremony for a couple who don't believe in such things? And I basically told him, I said,
he doesn't believe in rice?
No, he clearly doesn't believe in throwing rice. Neither do I. I told him what I would tell anyone who is interested, who has someone that they love, who has someone that they want to be committed to, who finds the ceremony still valuable, which is you can chuck out all of the things that have anything to do with sanctifying it before God, with having it in a church or before a priest. None of that matters. All that really matters is what you and the person you're marrying want to do. And I hope this also extends to people who are of the same sex as well, not just a man and a woman. But there's, in America at least, I said, on my experience, that you don't actually have to have a priest marry you. You can be a judge, or some civil servants have the ability to do it. Justice of the peace. If you're a ship captain, I don't know, there are ship captains in Guatemala, I would imagine. They can sign a marriage certificate. Or in this country, of course, anyone can be ordained by the Universal Life Church, which is whom I was married by. And as for the ceremony and where it is, get married wherever you want to. Get married. We got married on a boat. Get married in your backyard. Get married in the hills. Get married, on the beach. Just do something that's special and incredible to you.
Yeah, get married on a train. Get married on a plane.
Well, and then also the last bit there, which is, well, what about the ceremony? Because a lot of the connections between marriage and the whole ceremony is that it's religious. It's like, well, this is God sanctifying our union. Make it whatever you want to.
Yeah.
You want to get married? Make it about love. Make it about, as my friend who got married this summer, make it about role-playing games, because he made his marriage about role-playing games. Make it about anything you want to, just make it your own, and don't worry about what other people think, and don't worry about what you see on the TV and movies, because that's all hokum nonsense anyways.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's it.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to jump right into our topic.
Yeah.
This is something that had been rattling around my head for about 6 months, and I thought it was worth doing a show about. And it's a question of, does spiritualism as a word have any tangible value whatsoever? And I've come to the conclusion that it doesn't. I want to first toss out there, I am not a linguist. I am not somebody who has...
You're not a cunning linguist?
I am not a cunning linguist. I'm not somebody who knows all of the technical terms for any of this. I'm not going to pretend to be Noam Chomsky and bring out the history of this or that word. I'm not going to pretend to do that. So you can save yourself the angry emails where you correct my verbiage. So I guess for me, I thought about what is language, what is the value of a word. And for me, a word has value if there's a basic consensus on what the definition of that word is. So if I say table, I'm basically talking about any elevated flat surface. So even though you may think of a very different table, you may think of an operating table or a writing desk or even a gurney, whatever, we still have that same basic operative definition. The same way I could say dog, you may think of a shaggy dog, I may think of a dachshund. But there's a still basic classification. The word spiritual just simply doesn't have that. And there are even words, this is a real problem that we have even in our political discourse. Like, for instance, the way that the words fascism, socialism, and communism sort of around sort of haphazardly. Used really sloppily. Honestly, they tend to just mean some sort of pejorative for somebody you don't like politically.
Sure.
When these words actually do have very specific definitions. And I would also say the word theory is used in this way too. And this is something that I myself have tried to correct myself on. A lot of people tend to use the word theory sort of interchangeably with the word opinion, like, oh, that's just your theory. And this is something that I know that I don't want to help contribute to. I don't want this to be something where the word theory has a very specific scientific definition about the ability for somebody to make an accurate model that they can use to make a reliable predictions with.
Right.
This is something you can use as a backdrop for other discoveries. That's not how a lot of people use it. So I try to correct myself and not use the word theory in any method any definition other than the strictly scientific one.
Right. And that's for people who are interested in linguistics. It's called equivocation. Right.
Equivocation.
Where there is actually, whether it's two actual divergent meanings of exactly the same word, such that there's a confusion in terms of what the person is saying when they mean one or might mean the other. And then there is something involved with equivocation that has to do with just a very slight misinterpretation or malinterpretation, I guess you could say, of exactly the same concept. So that's really where we run into with spiritual, right? Because
and I even talked about the word like God, where people have very different definitions, but there's much more of a consensus on what God means to most people, that people can interpret it very differently. You can have Pat Robertson's God or Desmond Tutu's God,
right.
But in the end, both of them are talking about basically the same thing, which is a being or force with some sort of divine power that's usually, for the most part, most people tend to think of it as a personal interventionist being, either responsible for the creation or maintenance of the universe in some way, or the world, or anything like that, or even just a certain venue in the world. Like Poseidon is in charge of the sea.
Right.
And here's the thing: is that even on the subject of words like God, you have people who are woo-woo merchants like Deepak Chopra, who Sam Harris called him out on an intelligence. Was it an Intelligence Squared, or which was it a big think debate? I know he had a debate with him and some other woo merchant, and he called him out on his use of the word God. That Deepak Chopra had a very specific one, and whenever you called out the definition of how people actually believed in a God, he would say, "Oh, that's not the God I'm talking to." Let's move the goalposts here.
Right.
He would say, "No, I'm talking. That's the God of the past." It's just ignoring the fact that that's the God that most people tend to believe in. By any poll that we've ever done, it's a personal interventionist being that cares about whether you masturbate.
Right.
And Sam Harris called him out, saying that he was being inherently dishonest, saying that you are being happily misunderstood, that you're using this very specific term and allowing people to project that term upon you.
Mm-hmm.
This has always been, that's why it's important for us as atheists, though, when we talk to somebody who believes in a God, to specifically ask what they mean so that we're not just talking past each other. And a vast majority of the world does believe in this sort of interventionist personal God.
Sure.
And I think it's important that you first ask that question first rather than just assume it, so that you don't have...
What use... I mean, that's so true, and I don't even know how you could... I don't know why you would get to a point where you would slough that off, because what are gods useful for if you can't appeal to them to help you out? Or appeal for them not to cause an earthquake to destroy your village. Like, what use would a god be at all if he wasn't interventionist?
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. This is where I come to the word spiritual. I would contend that this is a nonsense word. It's a bunch of bunk, a bunch of malarkey, and that it lacks any sort of definitional consensus, and that literally you have a different definition for every single person you ask, and there isn't that sort of bottom line foundational understanding. There isn't a dog or table sort of basic concept that everyone is drawing off of. And this comes to my biggest disagreement with my favorite of the so-called new atheists, which is Sam Harris. He uses the word pretty extensively, and I think he tends to use it in sort of a taking the word back sort of sense.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's an it to take back. I think that though he isn't intentionally being misunderstood, I think he may be inadvertently causing misunderstanding with his use of this word.
Yeah.
I know that he may be unintentionally doing what Deepak Chopra does in a very dishonest, intentional way. So I guess we're going to go through some of the definitions that we have. We actually did solicit definitions from people over the internet and through the show.
Right.
And I want to actually look at some of these definitions, and we can see is there any real consensus here, and two, does this definition actually make sense in any way?
We should also let our audience know, too, that if they have a definition of spiritual that's not being read here in the emails or mischaracterized by us, you can give us a call, 206-421-5658.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. But you read that one off the screen. So the first major definition I've found of the word spiritual is just a synonym for religious, and this is the one that's used by traditional religious leaders, sometimes a lot of fundamentalists. So when Billy Graham has said that he's the unofficial spiritual advisor to the President of the United States, that's not what he's meaning. There's no differentiation. It's just using the same... It's like blue and azure or whatever.
Sure.
Just using two words that mean basically the same concept, so you're not using the same word over and over again. That's why you hear things like spiritual leaders, spiritual advisors. They're generally talking about very traditional people in very hierarchical faiths that have the same category you would call religion. Mm-hmm. The other one I found is spiritual is a euphemism for religion. This is folks that don't like the connotation of the word religion because it conjures images of, you know, witch burnings or Pat Robertson of Osama bin Laden. Oh, those people are those